should pull up audio settings. And then there, I believe if you go to advanced, or maybe not.
I'll figure it out another time. I know I had it last time. Now it's not the same.
Mhm.
Ugh.
Oh, yeah.
Good afternoon, Director Browns-Warren.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Director Gill.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Chair Bells-Monar.
Hello. Sorry, I'm finishing lunch real quick.
No worries. Good afternoon, Director Ricky Smith. Good afternoon, Director Manjarres. Good afternoon, Director Dunbar.
Hi, everybody.
Director Dunbar, I like your little screen picture there.
That was a summer moment.
That looks good.
Thanks.
Good afternoon, Director Ricky Smith.
Good afternoon. It's good to be with everyone.
Good to have you. Good afternoon, Director Gerard.
Hey, everybody.
Good afternoon, Director Barreto. I think I'm looking around my screen to make sure I've accounted for everyone. And Elizabeth, please let us know when we've reached quorum. That would be great. So we see. Good afternoon, Director Rosiles. Let's see here. Okay. I think we probably have quorum, Elizabeth.
Yes, we're ready.
Okay, great. So I am going to turn it over to our chair.
Great. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the last few waning days of autumn, even though I think for some of us, it feels like we skipped autumn. That autumn was about 3 days and went straight into winter. But I love the changing of seasons, and it's an unpopular take, but I love winter. I love just the opportunity to hunker down and be reflective and protect myself so that I'm able to grow and blossom. And that's really how I view winter, and get through any sort of seasonal sadness. And I also do take trips to sunlight in other states too, because that is for sure. So hoping that these meetings can be time for us to collectively gather together, reflect, gather our strength, and then go out and find our sunlight and reflect that out into communities. So that being said, I call this December meeting of the Educators Advancement Council to order with my invisible gavel, and Elizabeth will do the roll call.
Good afternoon, directors. I'm going to begin with Chair Bells-Monar,
Here.
Director Dupont, Director Gill,
Here.
Director Rosiles,
Here.
Director Barreto,
Here.
Director Brown-Warren,
Here.
Director Clark, Director Chris. Director Davies. Director Dunbar.
Here.
Director Gamboa.
Here.
Director Giles. Director Gerard.
Here.
Director Longoria. Vice Chair Juarez.
Here.
Director Oaks.
Here.
Director Mahares.
Here.
Director Hasuike.
Here.
Director Perez da Silva. Director Ricky Smith.
Here.
Director Subsalian.
Here.
Representative McLean. And Efren Samudio. Okay, and we have quorum today.
Great, thank you, Elizabeth. So we'll now review the consent agenda items, which just includes the December meeting agenda and the approval of the October meeting minutes. I think staff have already put the links into the chat for us to take a peek at, and then we can take a moment to review the agenda and the meeting minutes, and please let us know if there's anything that needs to be added. Okay. Has everybody had a chance to review the agenda for today and the meetings from our October meeting? Great. If there is anything to be added, please let us know. Otherwise, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda of today. Oh, it looks like some folks are needing access. Let's give that a second then, I think.
Maybe, is it possible to just share it on the screen also while we're giving access, that way they can view that?
There's an updated link in the chat.
Yes, I'll share my screen too, so everyone can see.
Okay, thank you.
These are the meeting minutes. Did you want the, is the link working for the participant agenda?
I see one
Yes.
thumbs up.
Great.
Great. People want to maybe just give some indication, like a thumbs up or in the chat box when they're feeling comfortable with that they've been able to review or get into the minute meetings. Thank you. So if folks are feeling, I'm seeing a lot of thumbs up in the chat. So if folks are feeling good, is there anything to add from the October? Okay, hearing and seeing none, I am going to go ahead and entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
I move to approve.
Great. Director Gill has moved to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
Director Oak seconds.
Director Oak, a second. Thank you. We'll now move to a vote, and Elizabeth will call a roll call vote.
Okay, I'm gonna Chair Bells Molnar,
Yes.
Director Gill,
Yes.
Director Rosiles,
Yes.
Director Barreto,
Yes.
Director Brown Warrens,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Yes.
Director Dunbar,
Yes.
Director Gamboa,
Yes.
Director Giles,
Yes.
Director Gerard,
Yes.
Director Juarez or Vice Chair Juarez,
Yes.
Director Oaks,
Yes.
Director Manjares,
Yes.
Director Haswike,
Yes.
Director Ricky Smith,
Yes.
and Director Subsalian.
Yes.
And press, oh, no, we don't do it, sorry. We skip,
Did I skip someone?
press,
Oh, Director,
cutting,
yes, Perez da Silva.
yes,
Sorry about that.
it's okay.
Okay, all approved.
Thank you, Elizabeth. The consent agenda has been adopted, and the October minutes stand approved. So thank you all. We now move into 3.0 public comment. Elizabeth, do we have any public comment today?
We do not have any public comment today.
Okay, thank you for that. So we'll move on to council business, which is agenda item number 4. And we're going to hear from Emily with some updates on programs and budgets, and then Kimberly to discuss our intergovernmental agreement. So I'll turn it over to you, Emily.
Great, thank you so much, Chair. I'm going to just get my screen sharing here set up, and then we will get started. So, my honor to share some updates with the council today. The first update that we wanted to share with you all is that we have been moving forward with planning for our in-person meetings in the spring. So our first meeting is February 1st in Medford. And thanks to Elizabeth, we've been working hard to get the details of that put together. And so we are excited to share with you that we have a location, we have recommendations for hotels, and we are also really excited to be working with the Southern Oregon Regional Educator Network to host a site visit the day before the meeting. So if someone can drop in the chat the document we've put together for everyone that lists all of the details about the meeting. We are planning to all day Tuesday, you're invited to join the Southern Oregon REN, as well as some of their partners, to visit the Southern Oregon ESD and meet a lot of the staff and coaches that work with Southern Oregon REN. as well as do a site visit to some of the schools that are piloting some of the work that the REN is doing. And then the next day, Wednesday, will be our all-day in-person meeting at another location in Medford. It'll be at the Public Health Services building there. So we've put together details, recommended hotels, information about reimbursement, all of that. If you have any questions, please do reach out to Elizabeth. She is the person who knows everything about that. And we also, if you have questions about like logistics, we can also work with you around, other pieces that we may have left out or we may be forgetting. So please do reach out to us so we can let other people know if those questions come up. So we're very excited. Our partners at the Southern Oregon REN are working hard to prepare. So Elizabeth will send out an RSVP form in the next couple of weeks after you've started your planning so that we can get a sense for who's going to be able to join us on Tuesday. And then hopefully everyone will be able to join on Wednesday as well. And like I said, after February, our plan is to then visit the Columbia REN in April. We'll hold our meeting in the Dalles and then visit the Eastern Oregon REN in June with a meeting in Burns. So be on the lookout. Hopefully you have those on your calendars and we'll get you lots more details for that travel as well. I'll pause for any questions. All right. So we shared with you via Kimberly sent out a long email with lots of information for you. We just wanted to highlight one thing that was talked about in the programs and initiatives update, which is that we are deep into the process of relaunching what many of you will know as the TEL survey. We are working with a vendor that, while it is using the same survey instrument, we've had the ability to make changes and updates to it, and it has a new name. And we are calling this initiative the Statewide Educator Survey Initiative. Bree has done a great job. It's now on our website, and we are really excited that we were able to work with several advisory groups, a group from 2 different RENs this past fall, as well as a statewide advisory group, to start getting input on the redesign process of this survey. So we are considering this is the first year of this redesign process. The survey hasn't been done since 2018. And so obviously a lot of things have changed and the world looks a little different than it did in 2018. So we are starting to gather input that'll inform the design of the survey. We are also continuing to gather input, and we will be doing more outreach to lots of groups around the data resources and supports that are offered that back in 2018 were available to districts and schools in order to learn how to better integrate the use of this data in their school improvement planning. We also know that there's a need, we've heard from partners that there's a need for aligning this survey with other state initiatives and other state work, such as schools, student investment account and plans. So we're doing a lot of work to make sure that this survey is serving all the different needs at the state, regional, and local levels. So you will hear more from us. This is just a heads up that this is coming, and we're working on launching the new survey in February. We'll bring more updates to you throughout the next couple of months as well. But we hope that you'll in the future be engaged in helping to get participation and answer questions about this in your respective areas. So the website has some information now, lots more coming in the next few weeks. And I'd encourage, if you have a chance to read through the other updates that we shared in that document, I think we can drop it in the chat too, the programs and initiatives update, just some exciting things going on there. Any questions? Okay. It's also my pleasure to just give you a quick budget update. We are getting back on our cadence of sharing more budget updates with you all. This is an overview of the first line is our operations, and then the next 3 lines are our grant initiative. So an overview of where we're at as of the end of October. So as you can see, I know there's a lot of numbers on here, so I'll just tell you what you may want to pay attention to. which is that we still have high remaining balances in a lot of our grant initiatives. One of the main reasons for that, so the next time I bring this report to you, that'll look a lot lower. One of those main reasons is we were in the process of doing extensions for our Grow Your Own, and those have just been brought through, so that number will go down a lot. That's part of the Equity Centered Educator Pathways initiatives, as well as we did amendments and it gave additional funds to the Regional Educator Network capacity grants. So that number is also, the balance there will be going down as well. We also have our staff on board for the Tribal Nations Educator Collaborative, which we're very excited about. And so that team is working hard with Mercedes to really plan what those grant initiatives will look like. But we do have one project that we've gotten off the ground, which was in partnership with Portland State University, their Indigenous First Steps program. So there's some information about that in the program update that we shared. So I'll pause here to see if there's any questions. I know this is just a high-level overview. We can provide more information, and we're going to work with Vice Chair Juarez to get more updates to you all and ensure that we're answering any questions that you have. Director Manhares.
Great, thank you for the overview. I guess mine is just a question, and I'm not sure if you all will be able to answer it or if maybe Director Gill can, but I'm curious about whether you all have seen the tentative state budget for the 23-25 biennium that was posted yesterday, and whether there's been an opportunity to cross-check this budget proposal with that, or if y'all are having communication from the new administration folks about that process.
I want to just make one clarification. This is our current biennium budget and our sort of spending to date, just so that we know that, but I can't answer that question. I don't know if Director Gill or Dr. Mateer can.
But Dr. Mateer, did you want to speak first?
I only got part of the question. I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. It was cutting in and out.
Yeah, no, I'll ask the question again. I guess my question is about communication. I guess maybe my first question, actually, just based on what Emily just shared, is trying to understand the carryover for the next biennium budget, like how this relates to sort of the state budgeting process, and also for my own just clarification. And then the second part is, yesterday there was a tentative budget posted by the administration about the 23-25 biennium budget for the state. And I'm curious about whether there's communication with you all about that, or if Director Gill or others have information to share about process and next steps around that.
Yes, I think I will let Director Gill take that question.
Okay, thanks. Thanks. We have that process for the budget for next year at the agency level is that we have created the agency recommended budget. It's under review by the Department of Administrative Services Chief Fiscal Officer. And they are making their recommendations alongside the agencies to the governor-elect and her team. I haven't worked directly with the governor-elect at this time. That's been mostly through the budget analysts at the CFO, the Chief Financial Office, working with them, and they do circle back to our staff for specific questions, and they would do that also with Emily and Dr. Mateer related to the EAC budget, but we haven't had that kind of interaction yet. And the governor's recommended budget isn't due until February 1st. I haven't heard if Governor-elect Kotek is going to try to bring it out earlier than that in a final form or not, but that's where we're at right now. Does that answer, Amanda?
Yeah, and it was really just to understand if that communication had taken place with the EAC specifically, and to make sure that the council was aware that that tentative budget had been posted.
Yeah, Dr. Mateer represented the EAC at our meeting with the Department of Administrative Services Chief Financial Office when we presented our budget ideas there.
Thank you.
And yeah, just to add, I can share with the council also after I stop sharing my screen, I can share the budget overview that we provided. I believe it was either in June or in August that talked more about what our current service level, so our current budget for the 21-23 biennium, and comparing that to the requests that we've incorporated for the next biennium, just to make sure everyone has that for reference as well. Are there any other questions? All right. In that case, I am going to hand it off to you, Kimberly, for our next part of our conversation.
Okay, great. So this next part of our conversation is kind of bringing back some action items from last year that we need to formally get on the record. So just so I'm actually, if you can go to the next slide, just to give you a little bit of background for those of you who are new to the council. We, so our Educator Advancement Council, all of you, our directors, operate under an intergovernmental agreement because of the unique nature of our governance structure, where we have our agency leaders alongside our different stakeholder representative groups coming together in this kind of collaborative decision-making body. And so this intergovernmental agreement is the governance framework, which really, directs how we interact with each other, how we make decisions. And it's part of it. It's one of our documents that governs our interactions and our decision-making. And so we're going to go through just 4 areas. What we've decided to do, because we have people joining at different times, we're doing a review of the IGA so that we can bring shared understanding to this document that governs our work. And we're doing it in chunks. So we're not doing it all at the same time. So this is going to be an ongoing conversation, and we're bringing just chunks of the IGA up at each meeting and having discussions so that people can do meeting making around that. So there are 4 areas that we took quite a bit of time discussing that we're going to walk back through today, just in summary. And then we'll need to take a vote on the decisions that we made last year. We need to do a formal vote on them today. Next slide, please. Okay, so this is continuing the conversation in these 4 areas, and we are going to recap our conversations from January to April. And then we're going to vote on the 4 items that we discussed during that time. One of those items is around the signatories. And so those are the formal signatures on the IGA. And so we need to update those because we've had changes in the signatories. And then we also are voting on seat changes that we made in terms of the council composition. And that is, really what we discussed about representation, about if people change their seats, what does that mean? So we'll go over that. And then the term, we lengthened the term of the directors serving. And so it was a 2-year term. And what we're trying to do is create more stability. We know that when we're creating change, we need more time. And so we had a term change. So the length of time that a director is serving, that was changed to 3 years. And we'll talk about what the discussion was there. And then the last area that we discussed was removing the voting distinction for rotating directors. And we'll talk about what that conversation is there. So we're going to go through each one of these individually, have a review of what was discussed so that you're clear about what we're voting on. And then after we review each of the 4 items, we will go ahead and take a formal vote, because we did vote previously. It was informal because we didn't have quorum. I think we were missing 1 person. And so we're going to take another vote to make this formal now. All right. So I think we can go to the next slide, please. This is the timeline of the discussion. So we reviewed the IGA and we set up this plan for a discussion. And this was the process that we took. So every time we had a discussion and we made decisions, we always took that back to the Department of Justice so that they could review our decision-making to make sure that it was in alignment with statute and the law. And then we brought back anything that the DOJ said in terms of the decisions that we made, whether we were good to go forward with that or if we needed to get some clarity. That's kind of how that cycle worked. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so the first item that I will share with you is that there was general agreement that we do not need to oh, my apologies. So what we're voting on, let me just put this back. We're voting on the voting distinction. And I think in terms of the recap, what we said is that there really wasn't a need for voting distinction any longer for standing directors and rotating directors. When that distinction was made in the beginning, it was because there were no rotating directors at the time. And so they needed to give additional authorities to the standing directors until rotating directors could be established. Now that we have an established council, we don't need to have that distinction any longer. And there was strong agreement that collaboration and coordination across the agency is important, and the purpose and the structure should be encouraged for this kind of cross agency collaboration and shared decision-making that the governance structure provides. So that was really the thing that was voted on and what was discussed. Are there any questions about the voting conversation? My apologies, I lost my orientation there for a second. Any questions about why we were removing the voting distinction between standing directors and rotating directors? Okay, thank you. I cannot see everyone, so if someone can share if they're, okay, great. I see some coming into the chat, great. Wonderful. Okay, so then on the rotating director terms and seats, as we really try to position ourselves as a learning organization and being responsive to the things that we learn so that we're providing better supports, we really felt that we needed longer terms. We know typically change takes 3 to 5 years in local settings. And when you're dealing with system-wide change, you need 7 to 10 years to really start to see shifts at a greater level. And we are really working to create stability for the council so that we can do that deeper learning and decision-making. And so we did ask for the terms to be lengthened. And so we are making a recommendation of 3-year terms instead of 2 years. And there can be a consecutive seat or a consecutive term. So you can serve for 2 terms in a row so that potentially one director could serve for up to 6 years. Okay, so that was one of the pieces of conversation that we had. We also wanted to be able to give time for onboarding and an orientation and mentoring for new directors. And then we also have, we also talked about rural early learning, tribal representation needs, and those need to be further articulated and developed. But the thing that we'll be voting on today is really about the length of term. Let's see, I saw something come into the chat, but I wasn't able to read it. Will the ultimate appointment of rotating directors require the majority approval of the standing directors? No, we are not. We're removing voting distinction. So it's all directors share equally in their vote.
I will just add to clarify that quorum does require 3 out of 4 standing directors. And then quorum also requires currently 11 out of the 17 rotating directors.
Right.
So that's not on the table to be changed. So in that way, I don't know if that adds more context to that question.
Right. And so we can have quorum to vote, but you don't have to have 3 out of the 4 standing directors to get approval for a rotating director. That distinction is different than quorum. So just want to make sure that those are that it's clear that those are 2 separate things. Does that help, Director Razilis?
Yes, it does help, but I will share. I'll share. As an attorney, I have concerns about being. I would not recommend to a party that I was representing, where they're a signatory, that to be able to give up all that much authority, because I'm concerned about the governance structure. This will be the only body I know of in the state that basically becomes entirely self-governed. For instance, the State Board of Education, any appointments that have to go through that end up having to go through the governor's office and then approved by the Senate. The commission, any appointments that are made to the commission have to be ultimately done by the chief executive branch, who's the governor, who again is a person elected by the people of the state. In this situation here, the standing directors, which are the agency executives for the executive branch, if they are asked to be signatories, it would almost be like you signing papers to buy a house that then you'll have no control over. And it's just a little bit troubling, because I think where we're going, I wonder, this council will seem to have responsibility only to itself, the way it's running. And yet, like, the commission ultimately has responsibility to the governor, and the state board does as well. So I'm just, my opinion, and it's just my opinion, and again, I'm only one vote, but I just see, I worry a little bit about that then this council could, make any and all decisions, and yet where was the accountability for it, other than if the legislature decides to give you money? But given the nature of all the things that the EAC has their, their, for lack of a better phrase, fingers into, that, I don't know, it just doesn't sit right with me.
Okay. Thank you for sharing your concerns. I do want to just say that we have, all of this has been reviewed by the Department of Justice, and there are, the council has to operate by the law, and we have statutes that govern how our council is to, govern itself. And so there is accountability, and the council does not have any authority to override the authorities of the agencies. And then also the signatories are not only agency leads. There are other signatories on the IGA as well. So I just wanted to clarify that point. Director Manjarres.
Thank you. Sorry, you absolutely answered my question. I was going to just confirm that the Department of Justice had approved of the changes so that we're all clear that they are legal and abiding by the statute. So just wanted to confirm that, and I'm glad you're able to check that. And just want to make a point, because I think I have sort of a different perspective, but appreciate what Director Razilis is bringing up, because I do think that since joining, I've had the opportunity to really sit with the intergovernmental agreement and just think about what the intent was around creating a unique body like the EAC and not situating it within existing agencies and finding opportunities to move away from some of the hierarchical structures that have created some challenges to achieving our mission. And my hope is that we can start to lean into ways of thinking about more collaborative and innovative structures that align with the mission and purpose of this particular body, understanding that ultimately the legislature has ultimate authority with the statute, because they could just strike the statute and the EAC goes away. And the EAC could also just dissolve itself. And looking back at the agreement. So just I wanted to confirm that this is legal and okay. But I think it's really important to hear different perspectives and opinions. And second, to really challenge us to move in those directions of thinking about how can we work differently so that we can accomplish some of the big goals we've set out for ourselves. Thank you.
I will just respond that I understand the DOJ's review it from the appropriateness of the legal stance of the council. But remember, I'm thinking about it. The DOJ wasn't speaking in terms of, were they representing me as a signatory? Because I'm signing my name basically to a document that I'm going to be ultimately responsible for as a party, and the DOJ doesn't represent me individually as a signatory. So that's my point. Okay.
Yes, thank you, Director Rosales. Yes, and I do want to get at the intent. It is a unique governance structure. It is one of the only kind in its country. I think I shared, in my, executive director updates that, when I was on a national convening, the executive director for the National Governors Association talked about this structure. So I think there's been some work and some research done behind this kind of a governance structure. And they were talking about, how this being the ideal state for, trying to advance some of the goals for equity that we have. And really and if you look at our policy very carefully, it talks about, we started to explore this at our retreat, the culture of collaborative leadership, and what does that really look like, and what does that mean? And I think that's why this has been situated as an innovative partnership to the state. And it doesn't negate the work of the agencies. It's to work in partnership with the agencies. And so what it's simply doing is bringing these multiple perspectives together in a way that we can actually, share in the decision making in a way that's going to actually elevate the entire state. I think it really is, that really is the intent of it. And I think it's up to us as a group to really begin to shape how does that play out, right? And so I think that's what we were starting to define. What does that look like, sound like, and feel like? And this is a unique opportunity, I think, for us to really to take all of the learning, all of the things that we're understanding about the persisting challenges of our state and our nation, and to really remove barriers to get to innovative solutions that helps bring all of our perspectives together. So I do appreciate you sharing that, Director Rosales, and definitely want, if we need to have further discussion, we can do that. But this is what we have been discussing over the last year. And we did, as a body, vote to remove that distinction for these reasons.
So I think what we're seeing on the screen is the current IGA in the language. Can we see the proposed language? Because there's multiple things in this right here. Not only does it say that the standing directors have the right to, they need to be there for the rotating directors, but it also talks about the dissolution of the EAC. And so I'd love, before I vote, to actually see, what am I voting on? Like, what is the proposal of what it will say in the IGA? Because like Emily talked about, the quorum is not affected and things like that. And so I'd kind of like to see.
Maybe I can just add clarification, and actually I'm gonna put up, I'm gonna skip ahead a little bit, Kimberly, if that's okay, just to
Yes.
show actually what you're voting on today is to, DOJ advised us that we needed you to vote with quorum to get a draft revision written up. And so, and then it comes back to you with the revision for your vote and approval to actually amend the IGA. So I just want to make that clear. So in terms of this one, there's, an IGA is a legal document, which there are multiple parts that may interact with each other. And so we don't yet have the draft of what the new language would look like, but it would, if you look at this last item here, the IGA language would be revised to remove this sole authority. There's places in the IGA where the language may have to be changed in multiple ways. But this is the current sole voting authority for standing directors. I hope that helps clarify.
And just leave it here for just a minute, Emily.
Emily, it does. Thank you. So we are voting to have a draft brought back to us. Got it.
Yes. Yeah. And we can continue to send it back until everybody feels comfortable with the language. Director Gill?
Yeah, thank you. So I just want to make sure I had that right too. So we're voting to basically ask DOJ to draft language that does this. And then we would vote again to say, the EAC as a full council would vote again to say, yes, that's what we want it to say after reviewing it. Okay, and then the final part that I'm wondering is, and this, Dr. Matsuri, you might not have an answer for this today, and that's totally fine. But the council voting on these changes, how does that work against what will be then the 6 signatories? I assume that they also have their individual and the authorities and responsibilities of their agencies to think about as they sign. So there's actually another level of agreement that has to be reached among the signatories. Is that true?
So my understanding, and Emily, you correct me if I'm wrong, because that's why 2 brains one and trying to remember, and she's been a part of these conversations as well as our policy chief. My understanding is, so when we had this discussion, that question came up, and it doesn't, just because we all share the voting authority on these 4 things in front of us: the appointment of rotating directors, the dissolution of the EAC. It says the ratification or amend to the board for further consideration of any AC decision concerning allocation of expenditures. So this is, again, who gets to be on the council. So we have a committee that reviews applications, and we vote, to see who's a rotating director. That's one. So these are the decisions that the IGA says that all of the rotating directors and standing directors have together. The dissolution of the EAC, being able to ratify any decisions made around funding and budget, and then also strategic plan adoption. Now, that none of these decisions negate or have authority over individual agencies or signatory responsibilities. You still have your own authorities and responsibilities, and the EAC does not trump any of those.
Okay, that may answer it, but that may also be a step ahead of what I'm asking,
Okay,
or what I'm trying to ask, and I know I'm not asking it very well. So I'm going to try one more time. So I think the process for actually changing the IGA, the way I understand it right now, is we're voting as a group right now to say this is what we'd like DOJ to draft. Then EAC as a full council will vote again and say, yep, that's what we want it to say when they see the red line version of it. And then it has to go to these 6 signatories and say, here's a new IGA for you to consider and sign. And so those 6 signatories at that time still have an individual decision based on their roles and responsibilities with their agencies and districts and ESDs to determine whether they will sign that agreement or not. Is that correct?
So I would have to definitely take that back to the DOJ because as you know, we did not, that part of it was not. And so from our earlier discussion and the sharing of the background, I think that is a question that we would need to take to the DOJ because there are other authorities, right, that directed the signature. So that didn't come from each of the agencies, that came from an authority above the agency leadership.
Okay.
So it would probably depend on the new administration, whether they would direct the agencies to sign or not. And so
that's kind of the end. I think the end point that I'm getting to is that the 4 items that we're basically saying that all directors would have an opportunity to vote on were the very 4 items that the IGA gave to the distinction to the signatories. So the challenge, I guess the question ultimately then is, if every decision making is given to the council in its entirety, then why is there a need for there even to be signatories in IGA, right? That's going to be because again, then I'm signing, then it would mean basically, unless I get some clarity otherwise, I'd be signing saying I'm giving myself no authority. That's kind of weird.
So I want to just make the distinction between the signatories and standing directors. Those are 2 different groups. They're not the same. And so they didn't have the same authority in terms of the voting distinction. And Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe the voting distinction was only at number 2. The first, in terms of the appointment of the rotating directors, my understanding that distinction was only there because there were no rotating directors and they needed the standing directors to be able to appoint rotating directors. And so they had to give that authority to the standing directors. Now that we are operating beyond just that kind of startup role, that distinction does not need to be there for the appointment of rotating directors. So that was my understanding with number 1. Number 2 is where the standing directors actually had, and that these are now what we're referring to as agency leads. That is different than the signatories. And that is where the standing directors had the voting distinction to dissolve the EAC without any rotating director in, voting authority. So that's really where, in terms of the funds and the expenditures, that really is the full council, and any adoption of plans is the full council as well.
I don't know. I think that's a mutuality of contract question then, because basically then I'm signing to something that I have no way myself of backing out of. And so I'm signing into something then that would, or the agency then is signing into something that, I know it's a legal term, but basically both parties have to go into a contract with equal weight and equal bearing. And right now what I'm saying is okay, yeah, I agree to set up this. I agree that about setting up this council and this IGA. Oh, but by the way, I don't have any more voice. I don't have any real voice then as a signer of this document to its dissolution beyond that of the council. So how would I, as an individual, then remove my name from? I just have some legal concerns, and I get that the DOJ reviewed it from the standpoint of the council, and does it align with Senate Bill 182? I'm not arguing that point. My point is I think what I'm signing here is basically signing my name to something that I will have no authority and control over. And I know we talked about EAC being collaborative, but I can tell you the collaboration works when it truly is everybody at the table. Collaboration doesn't always work when it ends up being a single mindset at the table that then directs everybody else about what to do. And that's kind of what I worry a little bit about here. I sometimes have thought that the EAC is getting itself into a little bit into a gray area that is starting to get a little bit beyond what I believe, at least when I signed that document originally, was a little bit more than its original charge. I think what the EAC is doing, it's taking a lot of the items that were in the preamble to Senate Bill 182, which are all the things everybody agrees are good to, but then basically creating it as its responsibility. And so I'll stop talking now, because again, I am only one voice on this, but I do have to consider my particular role as a person who's going to be a signer to a contract, because an IGA is a contract and what it means. So that means when I'm responsible then to all those superintendents, and I guess the reason why I'm bringing this up today more so than maybe in the past is, I'm starting, now that COVID's done, I'm starting to visit school districts again. And I met with the superintendent who was out in a more rural area. And I talked to him, well, how's his work with the EAC and the REN going? He basically couldn't speak to what the REN was. He's saying the REN isn't given their focus. They're not giving them anything that they need in their district and whatnot. So when I'm signing this contract, I'm saying we're going to collaboratively make sure that people are getting, what they need. And that we're efficiently using these dollars. I can't agree. I mean, I can't guarantee that. And if I'm signing to it, that's a personal responsibility for me. So I understand that. So again, I'll stop talking.
Okay. Director Gill, did you want to, I'm sorry, I'm trying to track hands too. Did you? My screen keeps changing. So
yeah, sorry. I lowered my hand. I'll be voting in the affirmative, but I'll make a quick statement about it that sort of qualifies future votes when the voting time comes. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Director Manjarres?
Yeah, I just wanted to make a request and could probably say, because I will also be voting in the affirmative to get the draft language, is to have the DOJ representative present to be able to respond to some of those questions in real time so that we don't have to delay the vote further, and to maybe in the interim also engage the legislative representatives, particularly Representative McLean and the legislative body that originally established the EAC, because I think that we're muddying some of these different elements where there's sort of a statute, an IGA that was intended to get us into where we're at now, and we're having a lot of confusion through the transition and the role of state actors as they engage in this particular body. So I think having the Department of Justice representative here to answer very specific legal questions about liability for folks who are sitting in this space, so that nobody's put in a position where they're uncomfortable, and we as rotating directors are not in a position where we're putting somebody in a position where they're uncomfortable. I don't feel like they have agency to make decisions, or putting themselves in weird positions of liability. And also engaging the legislative sponsors and folks who are involved in this, particularly Representative McLean in the interim, would be really helpful. Thank you.
Yes, we will definitely do that. We've had the Department of Justice come and do just that. And so we can do that at any time that you guys request that. And we will do that for the revisions for sure. Any revisions that we do. Okay, so if we don't have any further comments or questions on this, we'll go back to just finishing up the discussions for the other two. And then I think we can move to a vote unless we have any other questions and discussion. I think, yeah. Okay, so the outcomes out of all of that is that the council and the DOJ, because the DOJ did come to several of our meetings, reviewed the IGA for alignment to our policy and to statutes. They looked across different statutes, and so they did an extensive review. And they're the ones who recommended changes, the following changes based on this review and our conversations that we had over that timeline that we shared with you, is that the signatories do need to be updated because there was a change in one of the statutes to include the HEC. And so you see they've been serving on the council, but we didn't update our IGA. So we
Sounds like we may have lost Kimberly. Hopefully she'll pop back on in a moment, but I can sort of continue, or Director or Chair Molnar, I don't know if you wanted to.
No, I was about to say the same thing. I just wasn't sure if I was the one who got lost or.
So just, yeah, picking up where Kimberly left off. So the current IGA, so the signatories need to be updated. That was something that DOJ flagged, as well as the current IGA. This coming out of our recent conversations as well. The IGA does not provide a structure for when a rotating director employment changes that affects their qualification for the seat. And so we need to just look back. The DOJ recommended looking back at the policy and the IGA and amending the IGA to better match what our policy is. One reason for this is that, as we've talked about, there was an update to the statute in 2021. And so we just need to align the IGA to the statute in terms of those changes. And then also this has come up recently, obviously. And so we talked as a council in October about changing our policies and procedures manual. And so we just need to make sure that all of those things are in alignment. So as we said, the draft, that's what DOJ would need to dig into, is what would that, they will propose some draft language for us about what that can look like, based on what we know is the council's preference, that the council is voting to approve someone remaining in their seat should their employment change. So those are two that DOJ really have brought to our attention as needing more urgent addressing. And then these are the other two that the council had recommended via those conversations. So the term change to 3 years, and then the voting authority item as well, as we've talked about. So going back, so these are the 4 items that are to be voted on. Again, the vote is to request DOJ to draft revision language for the council then to review and then vote to incorporate into the IGA. I'll pause here if there's any questions or further clarification about these 4 items. Director Manjarrez.
I'm so sorry to jump in again. I just think it'll be really helpful in the next conversation if we could have the DOJ also bring language clarifying what we mean by signatories and what is actually required of the signatory. I think that, because right now we were hearing a little bit, but going back between standing directors and that. And what's actually required moving forward with signatories. It sounded like there needed to be just some, connection to the state. Do we actually need all of these folks to be listed as signatories? I think just having DOJ clarify that, bring that actual language so we can look at it would be really helpful.
Absolutely. Yeah, and again, like I said, this is really for DOJ to draft some language, because there are other places in the IGA that talk about the signatories differently from the standing director. So there is a distinction between those things. See, Director Gill just posted something in the chat, which I believe is the statute. Did you want to say anything about that?
Yeah, this is just the statute that determines who is a signatory and who must be a signatory. So there are 6.
So Chair Bales Molnar, I will hand it to you to facilitate the next steps.
Okay, thanks, Emily, and thank you, Kimberly, wherever you are, for going through that, and thank you for the conversation. It's very interesting to me to hear all the different perspectives, because I certainly don't bring that same eye or level of knowledge to the conversation. So we will now move into voting, and we'll be voting on each individual revision or request for revision language. So I will entertain a motion to incorporate the first revision into an amendment of the IGA. Just as a reminder, we are voting to draft a revision, which will then be brought back to us at a later meeting for us to review, at which time then we can vote to approve the amendment of the IGA. And so if we're ready, do we have a motion to move?
I motion to move. Is that all I have to say?
Thank you, Director
welcome.
Warrens.
This is Vice Chair Juarez. I second that motion.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Is there any remaining discussion?
Sorry, I have I just want to make sure I do know what the motion is. I know that we discussed earlier, but because I didn't hear it related to the motion, I just want to make sure I understand what I'm voting for.
Absolutely. So we have a motion to incorporate the first revision into the amendment of the IGA. So it's a voting to draft the revision and bring it back. So the motion is to move forward, drafting the revisions. I think where Emily, just to double check with you, do we need to call out specifically drafting revisions for review around signatories and vote on that, and then move to seat changes and vote on that? Or are we able to do all four together?
We were told we have to do each one separately.
Each one
and I think
separately.
we
Okay.
cite in the language about what the
Okay.
motion is.
So hearing that, Director Brown-Warnes, do you still move for us to vote on signatories?
Yes, I still move to vote on signatories to include the draft of it in the IGA.
Thank you. Vice Chair, do you also still second the movement?
Yes.
For us to,
Yes.
Okay. All right, so we can vote to approve the motion to request revisionary language around signatories for the EAC's review. Elizabeth, will you be doing a roll call vote on this one?
Yes, I will be doing roll call. Okay. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just handing it over to you.
Okay. So everyone's ready. I'm gonna begin. Chair Bells-Molnar,
Yes.
Director Gill,
Yeah, Elizabeth, so this is where I want to make a statement, and hopefully it could be captured in the minutes. And if everyone's okay with it, I won't repeat it all 4 times that we have to vote, but I'll want it to apply each of the 4 times. And before I make that statement too, I just want to be clear. So I heard a motion that was that we include this in the draft, not that we draft this. So I just want to make sure what we're voting on is drafting language for us to review at a later date.
Yes, that is what we're voting on.
Okay. Then the statement I need to make is that for these 4 standing directors, 2 of these standing directors have an appointing authority that is their commission. And those standing directors and signatories may need to go back to their commissions to review this request that will ultimately come before them. So I just wanted to name that. I'm not one of those. I am one of the other 2 standing directors that is directly appointed by the governor. And for me, that will mean 2 things. So that will mean, one, that I need to go to DOJ as a client for the Oregon Department of Education and have DOJ review for any risk to the Oregon Department of Education when I ultimately sign. And that I'll have to share and use that information when I speak to the governor and receive any direction from her. In my case, which is a little bit different than Alyssa Chatterjee's case, I'm not only a direct appointee, but the governor is actually responsible for the actions of the deputy superintendent. And so I'll need to make sure that I have a granted, approval from Governor-elect Kotek. I assume that this will happen after the 9th of January. So I'll also be reviewing there. So I just wanted to be clear that me voting affirmatively right now doesn't necessarily mean I can vote affirmatively when we see the red line language, or that I can sign. So I just want to be clear about that. But my vote is yes after saying all that. Thanks, Elizabeth.
thank you, Director Gill. Continuing with Director Rosiles.
I will vote yes with the same consideration and notation in the minutes as Director Gill, with the one difference that I am one of the 2 that would reports to a commission. So anything I would do would have to be ultimately clarified and approved by the commission.
Okay, thank you. Director Barreto,
Yes.
Director Brown Warrens,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Yes.
Director Dunbar,
Yes.
Director Gamboa, Director Gamboa, Director Giles,
Yes.
Director Gerard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Juarez,
Yes.
Director Oaks,
Yes.
Director Hasuike,
Yes.
Director Manjarres,
Yes.
Director Perez de Silva,
Yes.
Director Ricky Smith,
I would like it reflected in the minutes that I too share the same concerns as Director Gill and Directors Rosales, but vote yes.
yeah. Director Subsalian,
Yes.
and again, Director Gamboa, he might be in a different meeting. So Chair,
I apologize. My internet went out. I vote yes.
thank you so much. Okay, Chair.
Great, thank you. The motion carries. And so I will now entertain a motion to incorporate the next revision. And that would be around the seat changes and council composition. Is there a motion to move forward on that?
This is Director Manjarres. I motion. I
Thank
move
you.
that.
Thank you, Director Manjarres. Is there a second?
This is Brown Warrens. I second.
Thank you, Director Brown Warrens. We'll now move on to a vote unless there's any further discussion on this piece. Hearing none, I will hand it over to you, Elizabeth.
Okay. Chair Belsmuller,
Yes.
Director Gill,
Yes, with the same explanation.
Director Rosiles,
Yes, with same explanation.
Director Barreto,
Yes.
Director Brown Warrens,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Yes.
Director Dunbar,
Yes.
Director Gamboa,
Yes.
Director Giles,
Yes.
Director Gerard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Juarez,
Yes.
Director Oaks,
Yes.
Director Hasuike,
Yes.
Director Manjarres,
Yes.
Director Perez de Silva,
Yes.
Director Ricky Smith,
Yes, with the same concerns.
and Director Subsalian.
Yes.
Okay, all approved, Chair.
Thank you. The motion carries. I will now entertain a motion to incorporate the next revision, which is regarding term changes to 3 years. I'll entertain a motion to introduce that, the first revision? Or the third?
Director Oaks.
Oh.
Go ahead. I was correcting myself. Go ahead.
Director Oaks makes a motion to amend the IGA to reflect the new timeframe for rotating directors to be 3 years, term limits to be 3 years.
Thank you, Director Oaks. Is there a second?
Director Clark will second.
Thank you, Director Clark. Well, unless there is any further discussion, we will move to a vote.
Okay, Chair Bells Mulner,
Yes.
Director Gill,
Yes, same explanation.
Director Rosiles,
Yes, same explanation.
Director Barreto,
Yes.
Director Brown Warrens,
Yes.
Director Clark,
Yes.
Director Dunbar,
Yes.
Director Gamboa,
Yes.
Director Giles,
Yes.
Director Gerard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Juarez,
Yes.
Director Oaks,
Yes.
Director Hasuike,
Yes.
Director Manjarres,
Yes.
Director Perez da Silva,
Yes.
Director Ricky Smith,
Yes, with the same explanation.
and Director Subsalian.
Yes.
All approved, Chair.
Thank you. The motion carries. I'll now entertain a motion to incorporate the next revision, which is removing voting distinction for rotating directors. Does somebody want to make a motion?
This is Director Monjadas. I'll make a motion.
Thank you, Director Monjadas. Is there a second?
This is Director Brown Warrens. I second.
Thank you, Director Brown Warrens. Unless there is any further conversation or discussion, we can move forward with the roll call vote.
Chair Bells Mulner,
Yes.
Director Gill,
Yes, same explanation.
Director Rosiles,
Yes, same explanation.
Director Barreto,
Yes.
Director Brown Warrens,
Yes.
Director Clark, Director Clark,
Yes, sorry.
Director Dunbar,
Yes.
Director Gamboa,
Yes.
Director Giles,
Yes.
Director Gerard,
Yes.
Vice Chair Juarez,
I abstain.
Director Oaks,
Yes.
Director Hasuike,
Abstain.
Director Manjarres,
Yes.
Director Perez da Silva,
Yes.
Director Ricky Smith,
Yes, same explanation.
and Director Subsalian.
Yes.
Okay, all approved, Chair.
Thank you, Elizabeth, and thank you all. The motion carries. So that does wrap up item 4.3 on our agenda. And welcome back, Kimberly. She has rejoined us. Sorry about your internet dropping. It does happen to the best of us at always the most appropriate times and helpful times. But Emily jumped right in and was able to go through the rest with us. So
Thank you, Emily, and thank you, council, for your grace and patience. All right, so we will jump back in to our agenda. We're probably going to modify our time. So if I can get Emily to reshare, or whoever was sharing the screen, that would be great. Great, thank you. Okay, so we're going to do a quick look back to our retreat where we were really focusing on, this concept of building a culture of collaborative leadership, and then, really reflecting on where we were talking about our collective identity as a council for collective impact. And so one of the goals EAC, it together around decision making. The challenges that we face as a state are very complex. Oh no, I'm getting an unstable signal. They're very complex, and so it really requires multiple perspectives at all levels of the system for us to get a real true understanding of what's happening, and to better reflect maybe some new thinking and new strategies about how we can begin to approach tackling these persisting challenges. So we next slide, please. We talked a little bit about, okay, using this theory of action around collective impact, where they talk about starting from a common agenda. And so as we're unpacking and understanding the goals and the intent of our policy, how does that drive our collaboration as a leadership team? Because that's really what we are. We are a leadership team. And what we're trying to do is impact change, not only at the state level, but at the regional level, so that it's cascading all the way down to the local level. And how are we creating reinforcing, synergies, and then feedback loops for continuous improvement. So when we think about our work, we really talked about being able to start defining what are some mutually reinforcing activities that we can begin to study and learn from. And then once we identify promising practices, how do we scale those? And sometimes we can identify things that are going well, but we haven't quite figured out how do we replicate that success. And then thinking about common measures for what we're learning. And so there's some synergy happening between our agencies, VC, EAC, OD, and others around really learning about what we're learning. Okay, thank you. I am going to turn my camera off for a little bit. I hope that's okay, just to stabilize my internet connection and hopefully not lose you all again. But we are looking, what we really want to learn is what are we learning, and really studying the learning, and then figure out how are we responsive to the things that we learn, with a real focus on eliminating disparity, disproportionality, and predictability in our outcomes wherever it shows up. Okay. And then what is our return on investment? Are we managing, are we creating, fiscal responsibility? Is our stewardship, are we doing well with that? So in other words, are we using our dollars wisely? And we know we're using our dollars wisely when everybody is feeling supported and we're all growing and thriving. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the examples that we are currently engaged in, trying to bring this theory to fruition or to operationalize it. We're going to look at a couple of examples today, and really talk about the implications of what we're doing for our work as we move through this transition, and also as we think about new legislative goals or concepts that are being discussed as we think about the education workforce. So next slide, please. So one of the things that we talked about is we realized that that we have persisting challenges within our system in terms of how do we support our partners well. And one of the things that we need to do is be in collaboration. And so this is where we talk about bringing all of these multiple perspectives together. So we've been working across our agencies, the HEC, the EAC, and TSPC, in discussions to really try to figure out some of the problems of practice that we are hearing from our partners in the field who are trying to implement our policies. Next slide, please. So some of the things that are less visible that we do want to bring awareness around as we try to problem solve is that as we're engaging in collaborative conversations, we are talking about how do our roles work in conjunction. So in order for us to figure out how to work collaboratively, the first thing that we've started trying to define is, well, what what does the HEC do? What is their policy responsibility? What's the EAC policy responsibility? What's the role of TSPC? And then what's the role of our partner? And what is it that we're all trying to accomplish together? And so bringing clarity. And one of the things that we discovered when we came together and started having this conversation is that we were not all aware of each other's work. So it was really helpful to kind of sit down and lay that out. And we had a facilitator that worked with us to start laying out that discussion about what is it that each of us actually does, right, in our respective roles. So that was kind of the first step. And this is all a work in progress. We don't have it all figured out yet, but I just wanted to show you some of the things that we're trying to do to get us to this place of understanding and learning so that we can apply it to improving our system. Next slide, please. So then after we started to gain an understanding of each entity, each partnership, and what their policy calls for them to do, then we said, okay, what is our role in that with regards to this particular problem of practice? So we started to drill down, because this is a big system, but now we're trying to drill down and think about our specific challenges that are persisting from a systemic perspective. And then what is our role in addressing that problem across our responsibilities? And so we started to talk about that. And as we laid it out, then we looked to see, was there alignment? Was there synergy across our responsibilities? And if there wasn't, what did we need to do to make us work more complementary with each other and not in conflict or kind of stepping on each other's toes? So we really try to look at, what does that complementary work relationship look like so that we're supporting each other as a team? So those are the conversations that we're starting to have. The next slide, please. And then once we started getting more clarity around our roles and responsibilities, then we started to define some activities for learning that we wanted to engage in as a collaborative. And we are beginning to then now apply the principles of improvement science. And so we're using a plan, do, study, act kind of framework to start then mapping our learning conversations so that we can begin to study for ways that we can improve. And so we did, we heard from one of our partners, our system is broken. It's not working the way that it's supposed to. And so now we're trying to organize, how do we bring these multiple perspectives to learn with intentionality so that we can be more responsive in meeting the needs of those who are trying to implement our policies. And this is what we mean to have mutually reinforcing activities. And so once we go through a few cycles of learning, that's where we're hoping that we can start to share and apply the things that we're learning in real concrete ways. Some of those ways may be that we're not funding properly, right? And that we're doing a more one-size-fits-all approach instead of a differentiated approach. That could be an outcome, a learning outcome that we see. We don't know yet. We're too early in the process, but our partners are really going to be informing that learning and sharing with us where the barriers are coming up. And we're going to be able to document that in a concrete way so that we can learn and be better responsive in how we attune to some of the challenges that we're facing. And then once we figure that out, how do we then scale what we've learned so that we can create success and move away from these pockets of success to more system-wide or statewide success? So that's kind of the process that we're trying to go through. Again, we're at the beginning stages, but I wanted to just share with you how we're trying to move from theory to practice in real concrete ways. And I'm not saying that the conversations are easy. We're challenging each other's thinking, we're checking assumptions, and we're pushing each other's thinking, which is what we should do. And I think, when we talked about where do we have promise and where do we have tension, you all named, you as a council named that we have promise in our partnerships and collaboration, but we definitely have tension in the power dynamics in terms of how we make decisions. So we're trying to take the time to work through those tensions and learn from those tensions so that we can alleviate them and grow as a full system. And so I think that's the beauty of the EAC, to carve out the space and the time to do that kind of deeper work. Next slide. So now we're going to talk about another kind of partnership and collaboration that we have with ODE, and this was around House Bill 4030. So this was in response to a legislative ask. But I wanted Emily to share this as an example of, again, how are we learning? What are we learning? And then how do we apply that learning? And so she's going to walk you through the work that we've been doing with ODE around House Bill 4030 as another example of the work of the EAC.
Thanks, Kimberly. So as an example, I've pulled out some slides that we've actually we shared with other partners at another event, and as well I'll be sharing at the Senate Education Committee later this week. But the House Bill 4030 retention and recruitment grants were open to all districts and charter schools as well as ESDs in the state for it was a 1 year of funding. It started in this summer and will finish at the end of the biennium in June 2023. And the intention of the grant funds was to be used to support recruitment and retention efforts of education staff across the school, not just educators, but inclusive of all different types of staff. And so the EAC was brought in to help create some guidance as well as develop the application that ODE was using to have districts indicate that they wanted funds and how they plan to use funds. And so what we did is we worked to develop some guidance around what is the research saying, as well as what are we hearing from different constituents across the state, partially through regional educator networks, through statewide convenings that Senator Dembro was hosting, these workforce work groups, as well as other publications that had come out at the time. And so we put together a set of 5 improvement areas, as well as a set of strategies that districts could choose from to implement during this 1 year that were aligned to this area of improvement that seemed to be coming up for a lot of schools and districts, both in Oregon and across the country. The districts were also asked to engage staff in developing their plan for how they were going to use the funds. And so after we were able to get all of the applications in, our team did some analysis of the applications and how the districts said and schools were going to use their money. We wanted to just share a couple of interesting pieces that I think speak to this mutually reinforcing activities work that we're trying to do. So first, when we looked at what staff were engaged when the districts, the applicants were developing their applications, across the board, 97% of the grantees engaged licensed teachers, 90% school leaders. Instructional staff and non-instructional staff were also highly engaged, very low engagement with substitute teachers. They also named other groups that were engaged in the development of their application, including students, families, community members, school boards, union representatives, consultants, and ESD partners. And then they talked a little bit about the different ways that they engage these different groups. The reason I'm mentioning this is because I want to sort of share what we saw about what strategies they chose and how they described their problems within the idea that they were asked to engage staff in identifying those problems and selecting those strategies. And these were the staff that were involved in that, according to their applications. So what we could make some assumption that there was some engagement. So this is not just the identification of problems and strategies from the one person filling out the application, right? That was the whole reason why the legislature wanted there to be staff engagement. So some of the high level findings that we saw when analyzing the applications were these are the four most common types of problems that were described in their applications that they plan to address with these grant funds. The first, no surprise to anybody right now, difficulty finding and retaining qualified candidates to fill open positions. The second most common, a need for improved preparation and staff support. So that included training, professional learning, mentoring opportunities, and particularly for classified new staff and staff in areas of high need like special education. Burnout of current staff was was sort of the third most common. And then this frequently was described as caused by lack of time and space for staff collaboration, planning, and connection, as well as chronic understaffing in specialized and substitute positions. And then the other one that rose to the top was increasing cost of living, low wages, and affordable housing shortages across the state, so that these are exacerbating the ability of staff to stay in their positions, especially classified staff and staff in rural communities. So I think there's nothing very surprising on this slide. I think it probably echoes things that you all are seeing or hearing. It confirms a lot of what we're hearing at a state level that's coming from all corners of the state. It also, I will say, really maps to the areas of improvement, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about. So the areas of improvement that we had identified in the guidance were these 5 areas right here, and within each there were a set of 3 strategies. Each strategy was tied to recruitment or staff development or retention. And so you can see when we look across the 5 categories that 79% of all of the applicants, of all of the grantees that are getting funds, selected a strategy in the differentiated training and support category. The strategies that are within that category was first designing a tiered bonus compensation package aligned to performance goals. The second was establishing in-district or regional mentorship and programming support. And the third was supporting personalized professional learning opportunities, including contract extension to after-school or summer programs. So we're learning what the idea of analyzing these applications, the problems that they name, the strategies that they selected, is to look for where can we use this information to ensure that the work of the EAC, which you should see a lot of overlap here with these strategies that were selected, can reinforce the types of efforts that House Bill 4030 funds are supporting and vice versa. How can we create better alignment, as well as identify what our district's doing or what do they need more support in doing? So we want to continue to use information that we're gathering from these different sources to inform our work, as well as for our work to inform the work of the different programs and the agencies that are all involved in these workforce efforts. I'll pause there if there's any questions or reactions to this information. Or if Kimberly had anything else to add that I missed.
No, thank you. I do want to just add one thing, because the learning piece this isn't new information like Emily said, but what it does is, like, where do we drill down and really begin to understand the barriers? Where are the things that are serving as disconnect for why we're struggling to see the kind of success that we're looking for. And maybe then that's where we kind of refocus our energies, right? Because we know there's lots of things. And what are those things that are highest leverage, or what are the levers that's going to get us the most bang for our buck? So we want to just try to be very intentional and strategic in understanding where people are having. So this doesn't mean, oh, we've got to figure it out. Oh, we're just going to, pour all the money into this. But it's like, how do we set up systems and structures and supports in ways that deeper learning around the challenges can happen? How do we, that old thing about what can we take off the plate and really focus more deeply around? This could possibly give us insight into that. And then the one other thing that I wanted to say is that we know that there's different rates and level of learning around all of these different issues and tensions and problems. We've been challenged by them for a very long time. And that is to be expected. So we actually have opportunities to learn where people are struggling the most, and also where folks are having success. There's learning opportunities on both ends of the continuum and all along the continuum. And that's why we want to be able to create differentiated pathways for learning and support so that we can meet folks where they're at. We understand there's a lot of different needs, but we have to have a better understanding of what people are telling us. So I see some hands, but I don't know whose hand up was first, so I apologize. I think it was Director Manjarrez. Okay, thanks.
Great. Sorry, I'm trying to navigate technology. Thank you so much for this presentation. I guess first question is this the presentation that's going to be given to the Senate Education Committee specifically?
It's a snippet of it, yes.
Yeah, because I think that what's really important, and I just want to like elevate and appreciate the incredible work you all did to pull this together. I see the hand or the question in the chat, and it wasn't sustainable funding. It was sort of one-time funding. And I think that there was a hope that there was going to be a lot of lessons learned here. And so I have sort of a comment and a question in here, and the appreciation is that I know that your team stepped in to fill this need for actually creating that guidance and that application. And I guess my question to your team is that a role that you see the EAC continuing to play in these strategies? And if so, what is the capacity that's needed to do that? And would just put a plug, and this may come into the next part of our conversation, but making sure that the legislature is also aware of this collaborative piece between ODE and EAC, because I think there tends to be a lot of confusion there as folks are continuing to learn about the work of the EAC, and making sure that the legislature, as you're talking about that learning and feedback loop, as the folks who are creating these strategies, passing these policies, are also continuously informed so that this is feeding back into what they're doing as they're setting strategies and developing the budget for the next 2 years. So just making sure that's part of the larger strategy. But my specific question in there is around the guidance and application and the work you're doing here, and whether you see that being part of the work of the EAC moving forward, and what would be needed to make that happen, if so.
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, this is what we're trying to do. We want to be a support to our partners and agencies. We're not here to, tell agencies what to do. We're just trying to learn and create feedback loops so that we can be better informed decision makers about maybe what are the right structures, what are the right resources. We need more time. We always have that challenge of 2 years worth of funding or 1 year worth of funding, and we need more time and support because we know that change, you need at least 3 to 5 years, right? So just trying to tell the story, and we're here to work in partnership. But I think one of the things that we're hoping as we learn these things, when we're designing grant opportunities, when we're thinking about how we manage the distribution of resources, how does this learning inform the way we set up those resources, those structures, and things like that? So if more time is needed, how can we get out of this 2-year biennium, planning and switch to more of a 3 to 5 year, kind of planning? Because when we get the dollars out, what we're hearing is it's not enough time. So 1 year really isn't a year. And so if we want to see learning increase, which is our common measure, if we want to see that learning increase, then we've got to create the structures and the supports and the systems to align to what is needed to get learning increase, right? And so this will help tell that story. Director Subzalian.
Hi, yes, thank you. I'm just really curious around the design in a tiered bonus compensation package aligned to performance goals. My understanding is that the unions have been pretty successful in blocking things of that nature. And so I'm curious to, that's a pretty big percentage of what funds we're going to. And I'm just curious around my understanding, and it's limited to before the pandemic, has there been advancements in this space where there's more support in this area? I just am curious around the success of
I
those
think,
efforts.
yes, so I think, I think that, and maybe those who there may be other council directors who want to speak to this in real practice, but I think we've been hearing a lot of different, I think we have along the continuum, right? We have people who have successfully worked with their local unions to come up, and it's different kinds of incentives, right? It's basically what we're trying to say is don't just give all of the money up front at once, because it doesn't guarantee that that's what's going to keep folks in their role if the conditions aren't changing, right? You saw that compensation was number 4, it wasn't number 1. And so if you use all of your money up front, then it makes it difficult for you to learn how to make the conditions better, which is actually going to sustain your staffing. So I think people are interested in the conversation. What this tells me is I want to learn how to do this. Not that I know how to do this, right? But I want to start engaging in conversations and learning about how to do this, how to get union partnership around this. And I think I hear that from many different stakeholders, but I think that's where we have to still do deeper learning, if that helps. Director Oaks?
And Emily, and Dr. Matier, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but my association president wanted the bonus compensation. And we did not go for that route. According to her, there are many districts across the state that did go with a bonus compensation, not necessarily a tiered package around performance. And so I think there's lots of different pieces in there. And I understand because there were a lot of associations that wanted the bonus piece. And so whether or not that comes into play in this 79%, how much of that 28% was that?
Well, I will just, so in terms of timeline, remember, this was what people said in their applications that they're planning to do. They chose these strategies from the menu. We will, given the short time frame, ODE and in conversation with, we decided not to do like many check-ins on how actual money is getting spent. So there's just going to be a final report at the end of the year, and we'll have more information at that point about how the dollars were actually expended. But I think so. Districts had the option of selecting a menu strategy or writing their own strategy. So you can see overall 83% chose a strategy on the menu. So it's possible that there are districts that are also doing a type of compensation package or a bonus package that has a different structure than the one we're talking about too. That's also, we did see that across the applications as well.
And just to clarify, that was just one example. There were different types of bonus compensation packages that were named in the guidance. The bigger guidance was to think about a tiered approach. And that was also something that was talked about at the OSPA summit. And so it's just to try to get people thinking more, how do we stretch our dollars? How do we really work on the conditions that will keep, our educators, in partnership with us. So that was really the conversation. But I do think that this shows there's an interest in trying to figure out this problem of practice. Oh, Director Riki Smith.
Thank you, Dr. Matier. So a question relative to potential next steps relative to this process. How much conversation or at what level of conversation has staff had relative with our association, our state associations, so OEA and OSEA, relative to the potential opportunities with these funds.
You mean the one-time funds in particular?
Yes, and I'm thinking specifically if if there is an interest or it appears that there are promising practices that come forward, certainly any future funding that may come out of that. My reason for asking is that within my area, and I'm speaking around the TriMet area, districts, and we were one, were immediately approached by our associations relative to the bonus structure because that language was there. And we completely understood and worked directly with our associations, both our licensed and our classified. That said, we had longer conversations relative to the potential for continuing to address their concerns around professional development, but the thrust of their interest was relative to bonus. And so I think to get to where I believe these dollars wanted to go, meaning to those very issues that expand skill sets and retain staff. I'm wondering what opportunities have been taken or might there be relative to also engaging their state leadership at the table to fully understand the thrust of this particular strategy and the charge that the EAC has relative to teacher.
Yes, I think I understand what you're asking. So, and Emily, I saw you come off. So if you want to say something, I will just say that we still need to do more learning from the, like, Emily said, from the once we get the final reporting from the districts and where there are, I do think there's opportunities to work in partnership with OEA. I think, we've met with them several times on other topics, and they absolutely want to have a partnership with the EAC. They had invited me to come and speak at their conference this past summer. And we had talked about, even, coming to this April upcoming conference. I do believe that there is a desire to partner with us. And so as we learn more, I think that's our job, is to start sharing with the associations what we're learning. And I think that's the big thing. We just want to make sure we're learning something and that we understand what we're learning, so that we can move with intentionality and informing this. Because I think, in the conversations that we've had with OEA, they really believe in this idea of a culture of collaborative leadership. So we have shared value. Yeah. And it's just a matter of figuring out what's the right structure, what's the right support, what is needed, and really understanding that we all want to see improved conditions. And I think that we're on the pathway to getting there. It's just so new that we've got to give this time. But I think, we have the right people at the table, to engage in these conversations right now with the council and with our association, and their desire for this kind of partnership as well.
I appreciate that, Dr. Mateer, and I think particularly in light of earlier on in the agenda, speaking to the fact of the reboot, if you will, of the former TEL survey, I think that there is a great deal to be gleaned from that information that may inform this this particular funding. And certainly we have found within our own associations, and again, representing superintendents across the state, COSA, that OEA and OSEA have both been wonderful partners to have at the table. But I think it's a great place. Obviously, boots on the ground at that point in time before dollars or grants roll out, that everybody understands the purpose, so that when it comes down to individual districts having those same conversations with their associations, that they have been front loaded for that conversation, and we can have even more productive conversation is my point.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you so much for that. And Emily, I don't know if you wanted to share anything about anything else.
I was just going to add, these were one-time funds, which came down pretty quickly, and we worked really closely with ODE, and it was kind of like, okay, let's get this going. But the opportunity here was that we put this in the guidance, and we've continued through our engagement with the Oregon School Personnel Association, hosting some learning sessions tied to, we're trying to tie them to the strategies discussed in and promoted through these funds. The opportunity is that people are learning about the EAC initiatives by getting exposure to, I think, the guidance, getting exposure to the types of supports that the Educator Advancement Council is funding. So for example, the regional educator networks, we engaged them in the both in the application process as well as in keeping them informed about the House Bill 4030 funds. And so we encourage districts to think about how they might access other funds or braid funds in support of the strategies that they were using House Bill 4030 funds for. So I think there's an opportunity to continue this work and build off of, because the EAC has funded a lot of supports related to these around these strategies, and they're out there, but to Director Rosios' point earlier, not everybody is aware of them. Not all the districts are engaged with them. So there definitely has been that opportunity, and we'll see how much growth we have in those spaces through the use of these one-time funds. And Director Giles has her hand up as well.
Yeah, I'm an association president, so I just wanted to share a little bit about my interaction with bargaining around this language, or our being allowed to bargain. So when we got the funds, OEA didn't say use it for compensation. They just explained to us that we had a right to bargain over how the funds were used and have a conversation around it. And the way that I looked at it was that it was an opportunity for the districts to ask teachers, hey, what's the best way for us to use these funds, instead of the district making decisions on behalf of the teachers. So I just want to say that. And then also, when we're talking about retention, who's going to know how to retain teachers better than teachers? And so working with teachers to hear their experience of how can we keep you? And in a lot of ways, there is a lack of funding in education, and it's really helpful when we can supplement the teacher pay in Oregon. And so some districts did choose this for compensation. And so we've seen districts get funds and spend them how they want. And so OEA instead opened up an opportunity where, instead of districts making the decisions without teacher input, there got to be more collaboration. So that's what I wanted to share.
Thank you, Director Giles. We appreciate you sharing that. And I do think it's important. And this is why, we've been positioned with the multiple perspectives and representation of the council. We think that this learning is really important to surface assumptions that we might be making, to dig deeper into, conditions that, and just to better understand how do we create those conditions. And I think, we talked about internal and external locus of control, but by having everyone at the table, when we do see systemic challenges, then we're able to look at what are the systemic structures that we could potentially influence and design differently so that the whole system can operate better. And that's the beauty of this type of learning and partnership. So I think there's a lot of promise to, like Emily said, that this is seeding opportunity. And, Director Giles says it's seeding conversations, and we're just very grateful for the partnerships and the collaboration of every voice on this council and in the larger part of our work. our regional partners, our universities, our higher ed partners, our regional educator networks. No, we don't have we haven't been around for very long. 3 years is not a long time. And, to set up statewide systems of support and to learn, it's not enough time. And so, no, we're not going to see the kind of grand success in 3 years. We have agencies and other entities that have been around for decades who have been battling these challenges. And so we're not going to see, something, drastically different in 3 years. But what we are trying to do is set a foundation of learning that will allow us to have sustainability for improvement in ways that can accelerate the outcomes. And that's what we're really shooting for. Director Bellsmore, or Chair, sorry.
Fine. I think, and I don't want to take too much time on this, but I also want to just encourage us to continue when we're looking at those kinds of data and we're looking at impacts of funding, that we're also looking to see who's not being impacted around that. When looking at that previous slide, it's difficult for me to see how early learning is represented in there and where we are working towards that, and knowing that that is part of our purpose and our goal and our vision. School districts are sometimes a really good avenue for that, and sometimes they're not, just based on where they are, how they're involved in early learning and what they're doing. And so I just always feel like I want to kind of speak as the early learning Lorax and remind us that when we're looking at those things, or we're looking at certain data, sometimes it isn't capturing the cradle to career as much as we would want our impact to be.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. And I absolutely think that is really important. And so when we talk about, our common measure of DDP, we are looking at where do we have disparity, disproportionality, and predictability. And so, our motto at the EAC has been making what is invisible visible. And so we do need to see, we have been hearing that there is some invisibility along the educator continuum, and early learning is one of those spaces. So thank you for continuing to hold us accountable to that, because that is absolutely one of our goals, and why we need your voice here, right? To keep us accountable and to make sure that nobody is invisible.
I appreciate that, Kimberly. I know we have some other slides and stuff, but I also am looking at the time, and I'm wondering how folks would feel about a 5-minute break. Go grab some water and kind of come back fresh, because I know we wanted to move into some other conversations and discussions. Staff, does that feel good to you too? I see some emoji thumbs up. I saw some real hand thumbs up. I see some real hand thumbs up and emoji. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and suggest that we do that and we come back. It's 3:03 on my computer. So coming back we'll be very specific, 3:08. If that works for folks, just a quick 5-minute break. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I think if people can either put in the chat that they're back or turn their camera on or use one of the reactions, and we can kind of get a sense. We don't want to get started if folks are still filling up their water bottles and quickly replying to the 10 emails that came in the last couple hours. Thank you, Dr. Mateer. So staff and Dr. Mateer, if we're ready, I'll just turn it back over to you to kind of guide us through how you'd like us to use our remaining time. I know there was going to be some time adjustments.
Thank you. Yes. So we only really have, we're going to spend the remaining time to really just talk about our work as the EAC. And, you know, I just want to, you know, say that we are a team. We're a team, and we're really here to support each other. And we don't have it all figured out. And we need each other. I think our problems are so complex, we can't do this on our own. And I'm really appreciative of, you know, Chair, that, you know, you're bringing the visibility to early learning, because we cannot afford for anybody to feel invisible. This is not us versus them. This is not someone's greater than somebody else. This is really, I mean, building a culture of true collaborative leadership is not easy. There are lots of things to figure out. And I think if we as a leadership body can work through some of the tensions and some of the kinks, we have a real opportunity to make a difference for our entire state. And that's really what this space has been carved out for. It's a unique opportunity for us to do some problem solving together to help everybody, to help all of us be successful. And so in terms of our conversation and where we really want to, you know, leave us today in thinking about all of this information that we shared, and it's only just a tidbit. And this is, you know, ODE is doing a lot of work. TSPC is doing a lot of work. Everybody is working very hard. All of our agencies are working very hard. And this is not a cliche. And I know a lot of districts are, you know, talk about we are stronger together. And so I'm not asking us first to think about our independent work or our individual work. I'm asking us to think about what is our work as a collective, and what is it that we need to build shared understanding around as our collective work, to bring awareness around that, to say we're here to help, we're here to be a support, we're in service too. We're not here to tell people what to do. We're here to support, to learn and to grow, to learn, to grow, to be responsive, to get results. That is who we are as the EAC. But some of the things that we're trying to do in service to all of those that we support and work with in partnership, in collaboration with, you know, we want to have conversations around how do we begin to bring more awareness about this unique partnership, this unique structure, and what. So we want to have you review some talking points. So we talked about at the retreat that we would put together some talking points, because everybody has different touch points and different lengths of time with the EAC, and we're still relatively new, that we're building shared understanding around who we are as an entity. And so we know that over the last 2 years, certainly, you know, our system of education has experienced some, you know, unprecedented challenges, and everybody has stepped up to try to, feel the, to figure this out. School leaders, teachers, staff, everyone who works in our system has really stepped up and is taking on more and doing, things that we didn't foresee. And And so as we're trying to figure out how to better leverage our human capital, our resources, maybe redesign structures if those are needed, as we think about these things and the work of the EAC, how do we raise awareness? So there's one particular question as you review the talking points that we put together. We're going to ask that there's an essential question that we want you to anchor to. And if I can have that put up on the that slide for the essential question, then that would be great. So we're going to have you go into breakout groups. And the essential question on the table is, as a collaborative leadership entity, what is the role of the EAC in addressing education workforce development? And we, several of us, Director Gill, Director Razilis, Emily McCaffrey, our Chief of Policy and Systems, myself, we and others have all been involved in different conversations with the legislature and other stakeholders across the state around our workforce needs. And there's still a lot of unknowns about the EAC work, and there isn't a lot of awareness, even though, even with the legislature, even though they have a big role in our creation. And so as you review these talking points, I want to make sure that I'm very clear that this is not about being a lobbyist or positioning ourselves as advocates. That's not our role. And we're not going to take positions on different things. I mean, you can in your individual, but as a council, I think what our goal is to build shared understanding. And so as people are making decisions, that, we heard Representative McLean say that the legislature is really talking about not creating redundancies, not trying to add more tension to the system. They're actually trying to make things better. And so what is our role in helping to build awareness and understanding around what we're doing in partnership and in service to, right, all of our education stakeholders? And that's and so we wanted you to review the talking points that we put together, and we're going to use a protocol. Next slide, please, for you to give us feedback. It's called the RISE protocol. And what we want you to do is think about our common agenda as the EAC and how does it support the goals of the education workforce. There are two particular conversations, and Director Razilis, I don't know if you want to talk about it. He's leading very important work around developing an apprenticeship program. And then there's also been a conversation around, the role of mentoring. And so when we think about the educator continuum, one of the pieces of our policy talks about how do we provide support at every stage of an educator's career. And we heard different testimonies about the importance and the role of mentorship. And that is in a variety of ways, even at the university, at the preparation level, when you're just starting your job, and then when you're thinking about a career change, right? So how are we supporting our educators along the continuum? And we're thinking about that through the lens of mentoring. What is the role of the EAC? And what perspective from our common agenda might be missing in our talking points? So we have a lot of experiences that are brought with the multiple perspectives at the table that are represented on our council. So we may be missing something. Is there anything that we're missing in our talking points that you think would be helpful for us to build shared conversation around? And do you have any suggestions for improvement about how we communicate who we are? And then finally, is there anything that we should elevate in our communication as we engage with others? So that's really our protocol. And so we will have one of our team members there to help take notes and answer any questions as you reflect on these questions and our essential question. Then are there any questions before we send you out into breakout? And so we'll probably spend about 15 to 20 minutes, and then we'll come back. Anybody everybody can share any salient points, and then we will let you go because I know it's been a long afternoon, but so thankful for your engagement.
Just want to add that there'll be a staff member in each of the breakout rooms. So if there's any link issues or questions, and we'll also be sharing the discussion protocol with you there. Let me know when we're ready, Kimberly.
Okay, yes. So hearing no questions, I think we are ready to go into our breakout rooms. I think we have most everyone back. And so thank you for that. I think we had some great conversation. I hope everybody was able to have some great conversation as well around the talking points and just some of the questions. And are there any salient points that we need to share out as a whole group, please? We'll just take a couple of minutes to put those in the space, and then we can let our chair close us out for the day.
Kimberly, Mark Gerard here. I'll take a stab here. First of all, I think the talking points, the sort of stance, I'm on board with that. I think staff has done a great job kind of continuing to develop that and position the EAC to be a productive agent of change in the state context here. So thanks to staff for doing that hard work. One of the things that I want to continue to reiterate is that I remain concerned that we are not studying in nearly enough detail the ins and outs of kind of educator supply and demand issues across the state. I realized in the last legislative session that some money went to TSPC and the University of Oregon to do that work. But again, in my view, this is too important to be tasked to a set of existing relationships. I would much rather have EAC have the authority and appropriately resourced to tackle annual comprehensive educator supply and demand reporting, similarly to the way that we're already doing this around with the Ed Equity report. I think that's a great model for how we could do that. But if we're we continue to kind of shoot in the dark if we're not studying supply and demand in ways that are reflective of differences in geography, license types, endorsement areas, retention over time, migration within the state. There's a lot of slices on supply and demand. And if we don't understand that well, we will continue to kind of shoot in the dark. And so I just want to continue to reiterate my concerns about where Oregon is going if we truly wish to build an educator workforce that matches the cultural and linguistic assets of our children, families, and communities. We're not going to get there if we just continue to kind of shoot in the dark. So thanks.
Thank you, Director Gerard. Appreciate your comments. Anyone else? All right, well, great. So we have our notes, and so we will work on being reflective of the feedback that we received, and we'll be able to process that with you at our next meeting. And so I think Emily, remind us of when we are coming together again, and then I'll turn it back over to Chair.
Yeah, so we do have I will pull the slide up again. Our next meeting is Wednesday, January 4th. It's another Zoom meeting from 9 a.m. to 12 p.m. So just a short virtual to continue the conversations, as well as we'll have lots of updates relating to the legislative session, which will kick off in January.
Great, thank you so much. Chair?
Thank you. And thank you everybody for attending today and for the rich conversation. One of my favorite things about coming to this group is we can always think about an agenda and think about how conversations may go. And you all bring such dedication and passion and knowledge and perspective that I walk away every time having learned something new and building more respect for this collaborative work that we are really getting to do together, and that I feel honored to do. So Happy New Year, everyone. Please have some safe and restful, reflective time as we close out 2022. I hope those of you who have holidays to celebrate find joy in those holidays and delicious food. And I hope that we all get to take a deep breath and look forward to every day we get closer to it staying sunny longer, and we'll make our way towards that. It's coming. So thank you all very much. This meeting is adjourned at 3:55 p.m. and we'll see you in January.
Happy
Thank
New
you.
Year.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, Astor's going crazy.
My dog is going crazy right
So
now.
why?
Too. There must be something in the air.
Oh my